Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday night Creator Convo. I'm Noel Marshall and I'm here with my beloved.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We don't know what time it is. You don't know what time it is when you're participating in this glorious circle of love and co-creation. Cindy, we are delighted to have you with us this evening. Really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome, everyone, and look forward to our conversation with Cindy later after her presentation.
Yes, welcome Reverend Cindy Grimes, who we met. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but our topic for tonight is the courage to create. And she has a slide presentation for us.
Courage to connect.
The courage to connect. I wrote down create. Well,
that's okay.
To create both. The courage to create connection. Yes.
Okay. Very good. So you can turn off your videos if you want. Just stay muted, I ask, and we'll have time to interact with and put comments, questions in the chat. So let me tell you a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence as we begin. So please stand by. So welcome everyone, and I'm really looking forward. Cindy never disappoints. She is the Reverend at the Center for Spiritual Living in Ocala, Florida, and we met her in 2012, and we co-created, I think, 3 different events for Barbara Marx Hubbard's birth 2012 year. And I remember you singing John Lennon's Imagine for all of us. So in addition to so many other talents that I'm going to tell you about, she also has a beautiful voice. So welcome everyone. And now let me get to the formal introduction. Cindy Grimes' passion is empowering individuals with understanding and practical tools to transform their personal lives and communities. Cindy has been a child and family advocate for over 35 years. She has worked in the public, nonprofit, and business sector, having worked as a social worker, child advocate, teacher, training facilitator, entrepreneur, and magazine publisher. Cindy holds a master's degree in consciousness studies from the Holmes Institute. Wow. She presently serves as a spiritual director at the Center for Spiritual Living Ocala, and she is co-founder of Circle Up Center for Practical Peacebuilding and is a training facilitator with the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding. Cindy and her husband Grady have been married for 35 years. They are thoroughly enjoying their role as grandparents, and they reap rewards of raising 3 wonderful kids. And in 2015, she gave a TED Talk, and it's entitled, Kindness is the Cure. So Cindy, welcome to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday night. I know you're not a new person here, because you have brought us Gay-Lynn a couple weeks ago. We talked about using therapeutic use of psychedelics and other things, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. Let me just give you also her contact. You can look up her wonderful services are at cslocala.org. And she also, I'm going to put it in the chat, has cslocala.org/prayer-requests. I know I'm going to be putting something in there because this is really a trying time for us all as we go through the changes that are happening, the challenges to all of us personally. And yeah, it's I'm very grateful that you shared with us that we could send prayer requests to your beautiful community. It's a high power place. So without any further blabbering from Noel Marshall, Reverend Cindy, I'm turning it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I just for the warm welcome, for the invitation. I'm just always grateful to share and to be among people who like to play in the same kind of sandbox as me.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we have very similar interests, and I live in, between two worlds. I would say it's the world of the spiritual teacher, as a minister, as you mentioned, but also as an activist. And it's really an interesting place to straddle both those worlds and kind of get the spiritual folks off of the yoga mat and into let's get in the world there. And then at the same time, for the people who are activists and maybe a little more fired up about things, to encourage them to kind of look within and make the changes inside of themselves. So it's very, as you said, we're in fascinating times. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to go ahead and let me see. Oh, this is always challenging for me, but let me see if I can share screen here. Oh, the courage to connect. It does take courage to connect. In a lot of ways, it may feel easier for us to isolate, especially when the world gets real crazy. But that's what we're going to talk about today is some of what that takes, the social emotional skills that it takes to connect. And so Bob and Noel, you might appreciate these pictures here. One of the areas where we connected was in interest in prison ministry. In fact, you all came out to Marion Correctional, where I was volunteering. I started out as a volunteer at the prison. Someone requested a Toastmasters group to come and speak and or to help them actually get a group started. So I was part of that group of volunteers. And from the moment we walked in, you don't know what to expect walking into a place like that, but we certainly did not expect a standing ovation and the really warm and beautiful reception that we received. They were so grateful that we were there. And I realized that the gentleman there, for the Christian folks, there were programs. For other groups, there were some programs, but there was nothing for the guys who really considered themselves spiritual, but not religious. And I started teaching some self-help kinds of stuff and the kinds of things I was teaching at church or at the center. And at the same time, I was being introduced to the realm of peace building and more of the activist work. So I started implementing some of those things. And these are some of the comments that I got from the men who were incarcerated. Again, it was a prison, so these guys were there for a long time. This was not at the work camp where they were, under 10 years. And these were the kinds of takeaways they got, right? I learned when you blame others, you give up the power to change. For the longest time, I kept things locked away due to not wanting to relive past events and learn how to deal with them to be a better person. So really a lot of inner work they did. I thought I was going in to help them at some point, in the future. And I realized I was helping myself as well as helping them in their present lives, their present situation. So imagine a young man, I realizing from behind bars, I can make a difference in the lives of others. I am valuable. And they did that. They really came together as community and family. And again, I learned things that I believed before were universal principles, but it really brought it home for me, being in this kind of environment. And I've taught these ideas in middle school and high school. I have taught to professionals in university, and I taught to these guys in prison some of the things I'm going to share with you tonight. So I hope that you find it of value. Another statement here, a lot of us wear armor to cope with our lives. However, this class gave us an environment to open up around others who wanted to do the same. So I love Carl Jung, and this quote from him: "There's no consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And I think I introduced the work I did at the prison because those guys can't run from their dark side. It's kind of there for everyone to see. They've made mistakes and committed crimes that their environment does not allow them to forget. So that's part of why I feel like I learned so much working with these men about authenticity and about courage and the willingness to look in those dark places. Because, I'm a New Thought minister, and I feel one of our big challenges in New Thought that I have seen is spiritual bypass. That idea, we like to focus so much on what it is we want to see in the world, which is a beautiful thing, right? And energy flows where attention goes. So you want to put your attention on what it is you want to experience. But that doesn't mean you get to bypass the darker, some of those things we have to go into them. We have to move forward. We don't get to go around them. We don't get to skip it. We don't get to bypass it and really live fully. So that's one of my pet peeves, I think, is the idea of spiritual bypass. So then how is it that we make that darkness conscious? How do we do that? A lot of it, we don't like to feel pain, right? For most of us, it's an uncomfortable thing. So we'd rather not look at those dark places. And that's where it takes the courage, to meet ourselves in our darkness, but also to be in it with others. And God knows there's a lot of that these days. So it requires actually that we be willing to confront. And for some people, that's not a nice word, right? To be confrontational, to confront something. But what it really means is to stand in front of, to be facing it. So instead of denying the darkness, instead of bypassing it, what I'm asking is that we look at it, that we confront the things that we are afraid of, the things that may be causing us pain, and know from a spiritual standpoint, and that's where everything begins, that we have everything we need to move through to the other side of whatever that thing is that looks so big and scary. Let's see what is going on here. Ooh, did I do that? Right. So here's that idea of confrontation, and probably the thing that scares us most, right? Well, I don't know, you may be different than me. I know there are some people who look at conflict. Some people seem to enjoy it, right? Many of us, and I'll say again, folks on the spiritual path tend to not like conflict, but here we go. Conflict and interpersonal difficulties are like a storm system that arises when two weather fronts converge. Right? Competing needs, wants, and values combined with our misperceptions, defensiveness, and the need to be right create that energetic field that is the storm inherent in personal conflict. Right? So you think about two storm fronts, they both have their own energy and their own, being, and they bump up against each other. And that's where where the thing happens, right? That's where the storms happen. That's where the conflict is, in the midst of those competing needs and wants and values. So here's the big paradigm shift. I imagine you've all heard this, right? That term paradigm shift with the co-creators convergence, right? We're in the midst of a massive shift right now. And from the peace building work, this comes from a man named Dominic Barter, who is one of the fathers of the restorative justice movement. And he says, rather than being dangerous, conflict holds within it vital messages regarding unmet needs and areas of necessary change. Given this understanding, then, safety is increased not by avoiding conflict, but by moving toward it with the intention of hearing the messages within. Again, confronting it. So this idea that we create bigger walls, right? More isolation is not making us safer in any way. In fact, it is making us more dangerous, putting us in more danger, stranger danger. We don't know the people on the other sides of our prejudices and these divisions that we create. So the idea is that we go toward the conflict instead of going away from it. So I love to use this analogy because that might seem foolhardy for me or silly for me to tell you to go toward the conflict when we know how much danger there could be in a situation like that. And so I use the analogy of a firefighter. And we know that firefighters, along with police officers and soldiers and those kinds of people, run toward the danger while everybody else is going the other direction. Right? However, they're not dressed like you and me. They're people like you and I, but they have their training, they have their special equipment, they have they have what they need to do to go toward the danger, do what needs to be done, and come out on the other side. And if they've done their work well, they've brought some people along with them. Right. So I like to think of these peace building practices and ideas that I teach as the equipment that we need to be able to go into uncomfortable or even dangerous situations of conflict and come out on the other side wiser, stronger, better. And so what are those things? What are those tools and principles? The broad umbrella term is social emotional leadership or social emotional learning. This is a field that continues to evolve. If you hear about SEL, that's the abbreviation, social emotional learning. In most people's estimation, it's something that's done with children at the school level. But adults can't teach what they don't know. And so these skills, just like any other intelligence, are skills that we can learn and can be taught. We probably just never knew it before. I'll say for myself, I did not know. I'm 60 years old, and for me, this work has come to me in the last, 15, 20 years. And I was a psychology major. This stuff was not being taught when I was in school. And so these social emotional leadership competencies are in 4 broad areas. The first one is your personal self-awareness, right? Where are you on the emotional scale, and how do you manage those emotions, right? We have all of these emotions, some of which are wonderful, some of them we don't like so much, right? Anger, grief, shame, guilt, all of these things. It's important to know not just what they are and be able to identify them, but how do we manage them and how do we use them for our benefit and not get used up by our emotions, right? If you've ever been in a state where you were emotionally overwhelmed, that's what I'm calling being used by your emotions, where you get out of control, say with anger or with grief or any of those things that can keep you stuck. So there's emotional self-management. And then there's the social awareness, right? Which comes from understanding ourselves. It helps us understand other people as well. And the social awareness that goes into empathy and understanding groups. And then we have relationship management, which is for folks who are willing to claim the title of leader, right? And having influence over others. coaching and mentoring, dealing with conflict, teamwork, inspiring folks. And I said that the way I said it about people willing to claim leadership, because the truth is that we're all leaders for somebody else. Even my grandchildren, you know, we've got 4 grandkids, and they look to each other for leadership. And it's a really beautiful thing to see, you know, when they step into that and are willing to, you know, to lead one another. So I think these are competencies for everybody, but again, people have to be willing to, you know, to kind of go there. So I call this idea social emotional leadership, SEL 101, like the basic importance of this work. And let's see, I can't see the chat. Maybe Noel can read it out to me. What percentage of the iceberg do you think is above the water? Anybody want to put it in the chat? You all want to guess? Okay, here we go. 10%, 10%, 10%. Yep, y'all are pretty close. I've heard 10 to 15%. Very good. So in this iceberg of human complexity, imagine that we are all icebergs, right? At the tip of that iceberg, what we see is a person's behavior. So that, let's go with that analogy. You know, you see 10 to 15% of who somebody is. What do you think is underneath that behavior? Anybody want to put some things in the chat? What might be underneath a person's behavior? Environmental issues, yes. Religious beliefs, absolutely. Experiences, yes. Yes, go on. Needs, feelings, traumas, belief system, absolutely. Memories, there you go. You've hit them. You've hit all the stuff I was going to say. So here we go. In the context of this conversation about social emotional learning and peace building, you see a person's behavior, but underneath that is their needs, both needs that are met and needs that are unmet, as well as the feelings that go along with that, the values that they have been taught and have made their own, and their various experiences and traumas, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a little exercise here, and I'm going to invite you to unmute for a minute, if that's okay. Or maybe just put it in the chat. Let's do it that way. Let's put it in the chat. I'd like for you all to take a look at this list right now and pick a couple of needs that are met for you in this moment. And then just put them in the chat. Let's see what we get. Needs that are met. And FYI, this list comes from the Center for Nonviolent Communication and is available on their website for free. You can download this if you would be interested in using this with other folks. So here we have great sense of community, learning and safety. We have belonging, community. There's that word again. Beautiful. Respect, safety, support, trust, respect. Look at that. There's a lot of commonality in this group. Wonderful, wonderful. Physical well-being. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Now physical well-being and meaning. Very good. Good, good. So now I'd like you to take a look at this list. Now see how you feel, right? When you look at those things, those feelings that are met, I mean, those needs that are met for you, and think about how that feels. And in part 2, the next part, we're going to look at these needs and maybe jot down a couple of them that are not met or that you would like more of. Needs that are either not met or you would like more of. Gonna be brave. Are you all are feeling pretty good, huh? No needs unmet, nothing you'd like more of? Okay, self-expression, order, joy. Yep. I'm with you on order. Too. Touch. Yeah. Let me see what I've got here. Clarity. Yep. Contribution, order, touch. Yeah, order, that seems to be a big one here too. Okay. So now get in touch with what it feels like when those needs are not met. And then we have another list here to give you some. So your feelings when needs are met, would you all agree?
Mhm.
I can see Noel. Yeah, right. When your feelings are met, it's all the good stuff. Affection, compassionate, you feel engaged, involved, hopeful, confident, proud, peaceful, refreshed, joyful. When needs are not met, it's a very different list. We feel afraid, worried, annoyed, angry, resentful, heartbroken, sad, etc., etc. Again, these lists are on the website for the Center for Nonviolent Communication. Let me see if there's anything else here. Sleep, yep, that's a big one. So here's, again, what I call social emotional learning 101, right? Needs lead to certain feelings. When your needs are met, you feel one kind of way. When your needs are not met, you feel a different kind of way. And that leads to behavior, right? So essentially, needs drive behavior. Regardless of our many differences, we all have the same needs as human beings. That's the human part, right? We're spiritual beings having a human experience. But what differs and how we differ is our strategy for fulfilling our needs. Behavior represents those strategies for getting needs met. So those guys I started with talking about the men at the prison, they had certain needs. And they went about getting those needs met in ways that, were illegal, that ended them up in prison. Whether because that was how they were taught or, desperation, whatever the need might be. So that brings me to this idea of courage and what it takes to get our needs met, right? To acknowledge that we have them in the first place, because that can be a thing unto itself. I can remember being in a classroom doing that exercise with a group of teachers, and one of them was actually in tears. She said, I'm so busy taking care of everybody else. I can't tell you when was the last time somebody asked about my needs. Right. So courage, it takes courage to acknowledge that. Sometimes just to acknowledge that we're human. How crazy is that? To say I'm a human being with needs and I'm hurting, So Winston Churchill said, courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities because it is the thing that guarantees all others. I think I had those slides in backwards. I want to show you this one. A little bit more on social emotional learning. I don't know if any of you have seen this. Noel, do you know this chart, the Power versus Force, David Hawkins?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, phenomenal book. This chart, I don't know how many pages of writing there are about this. So this is just a big summary of David Hawkins' work. And what he's done is taken all these different emotions, things that we can go through. And I tend to look at the part that says level on the side here. If you look at that level, that shame is the lowest, like the worst thing that we can feel as human beings. And then it goes up from there, right? Shame is at the bottom. Guilt is above it because shame, the difference between shame and guilt is when we feel ashamed is I am bad, right? I am broken. There's something wrong with me versus guilt where you say, I did something wrong, right? There's a little separation there. It's not that you are bad. It's that you did something, right? That was hurtful or bad perhaps. And then we keep moving up from there, right? You go from shame, guilt, then we go to apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride. Then there's a point, you see all of that stuff at the bottom is what he calls force. Those are all those emotions and life views that are really heavy and don't feel good. Now, get all of these feelings. This is universal stuff, right? We all have these things. We all feel shame. We all feel guilt at different times in our lives. These are the things we don't talk about, right? Again, why it takes courage, because you're not hearing this in regular conversation among people. We do circles in our community. We have circle conversations where people can start to get some of this stuff out of their system and realize, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just a human being. Or, hey, it's not that I am bad or there's something wrong with me. It's the things that happened to me. It's the trauma, it was the experiences. So on this chart, I won't spend a whole lot of time. I mean, what it could take, this could be like days of workshops on this chart alone, but you'll see that all of the good stuff begins with courage. That is the tipping point where we move from force into our power. And moving up into the areas of love and reason, peace, enlightenment, et cetera, et cetera. So I love this because for me, our emotions are like our internal GPS system. If you're sitting on the yoga mat and you're in that blissful, peaceful, wonderful place, and then you go out in your car and you get in traffic and all of a sudden somebody cuts you off and you have now fallen all the way down to anger, that's probably not the direction you want to go. Not to say there's something wrong with you, but just, that inner gut check is this, where I want to be, and realize what it takes to move yourself up the scale. So that's Power versus Force. Excellent book by David Hawkins. So courage, right? Courage and compassion. It takes courage to have compassion. The Dalai Lama said that courage is the radicalism of our time. It takes courage to have compassion. Sometimes, the most courage to have compassion for ourselves, compassion for self and others. That word compassion, I think it's Latin, com meaning with or together, and then passion to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, compassion is defined as the feeling that arises when we're confronted with another person's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering, right? It has a biological basis, suggesting an evolutionary purpose. This makes me think of another paradigm shift in Darwin. People think that Darwin was all about survival of the fittest and that the fittest meant the biggest, the baddest, the meanest, etc. But what Darwin found was that the fittest was the one that could adapt the best, the one that could be in community the best. And we human beings are communal beings, whether we realize it or not. We need other people. And so compassion, the benefits of compassion, imagine this: increased longevity. Compassion is a buffer against stress. You can have less anxiety and depression when you're in a compassionate state, increased hopefulness and life satisfaction, and then elevation and positive contagion. I think one of the things I learned through the pandemic was how quickly, not just that germs can spread, but emotions spread very, very quickly. And so I take extra care to watch what I'm putting out there in the world, even on an emotional level. Right? So it behooves us all to work out our own stuff before we spread it out there. Fear spreads very, very quickly and is not very useful. I'm looking here at the chat, see if there's anything. Sorry, missing this. Circle conversations. Oh, from Bob, seems our country's citizens are at fear. Yes, that's one thing. Let me go, I don't know if I can go back or not. The power versus force. whole groups of people, whole countries vibrate at different levels. Somewhere between desire and fear and anger, that's probably where the US is vibrating right now as a collective. You know, other countries, a lot of them are in the same place that we are. Some are a little bit higher up, perhaps, but we're all in this together. So compassion helps us deal with this thing we call shame, right? Shame needs three things to grow exponentially in our lives: secrecy, silence, and judgment. This comes from Brene Brown, who has written some phenomenal books. She has one called, I think it's Atlas of the Heart, that breaks down all these different emotional states so that you can really increase your vocabulary around what the different emotions mean. For example, what's the difference between compassion and empathy? You know, empathy is feeling another person's pain. Compassion is feeling that pain and being moved to take action, right? So anyway, shame needs three things to grow exponentially in our lives: secrecy, silence, and judgment. Shame depends on me buying into the belief that I am alone. Here's the bottom line: shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot survive empathy. When we find the courage to share our experiences and the compassion to hear others tell their stories, we force shame out of hiding and end the silence. You know, it takes courage to be vulnerable, but it can also be a great strength because it invites connection with other people. And it invites that compassion. Here's just a little more why you don't want to stay stuck in shame: the impact of shame, perfectionism, and people pleasing, big ego. Gosh, we're seeing a lot of that. If you could think about some of the big egos that we're seeing on the national and international stage, to realize how much shame there is behind all that bluster and all that ego and narcissistic behavior. Shame can cause addictions and physical health issues, mental health problems, feelings of being flawed or broken, and then for social withdrawal and loneliness, which is another huge epidemic that we are dealing with in this country, is an epidemic of loneliness and social withdrawal, which, you know, becomes this it's a cycle, right? We're afraid, so we isolate, and then we isolate and we become more afraid. And it just keeps driving this kind of negative spiral. So again, as I mentioned, you know, in this social emotional learning, that we human beings are social beings. We come into this world as the result of others' actions. That's a nice way of putting it, isn't it? The Dalai Lama, I thought that's kind of cute. We come into this world as the result of others' actions. We survive here in dependence on others. Whether we like it or not, there's hardly a moment in our lives when we do not benefit from others' activities. For this reason, it is hardly surprising that most of our happiness arises in the context of our relationship with others. Yeah, and that's from the Dalai Lama. And then Margaret Wheatley, who is a writer on leadership and in organizations, says relationships are all there is. Everything in the universe only exists because it is in relationship to everything else. Nothing exists in isolation. We have to stop pretending we are individuals that can go it alone. Albert Einstein said we suffer from a delusion of consciousness, right? That has us favor, you know, the people that are closest to us, when really we are connected to all of it, to everyone. And the changes that we make within ourselves, you know, can be a catalyst for change. Like it, you know, it goes out like this, like a ripple effect, you know, as a ripple effect. There we go. I'm a fan of the Dalai Lama. Here he is again. Be a peace builder. Peace does not mean an absence of conflict. Differences will always be there. Peace means solving these differences through peaceful means, through dialogue, through education, knowledge, and through humane ways. I love that he says that. You know, it's part of that paradigm shift of looking at conflict in a different way. Instead of looking at it as something to fear or something to back away from, let us look at it as an access point to deeper, stronger connection and even creativity. Even creativity. When we have conflict, it gives us opportunities to come together in new ways. You know, maybe something that was even better and stronger than what there was before. You know, and how we find ways to get our needs met and to create new things. So, what's your why? What's your why? This is my why. This is two of my whys right there of the grandbabies I mentioned before. We don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And I'm one of those girls. I guess I was a Girl Scout. I don't remember if that's where this came from, but that idea of leaving things better, you know, than how you found them. Right? I see Noel is doing this. Yeah, I know we like to play in that same sandbox, right? Or kiddie pool. Yes, you know, that's why we're here. That's why the Creators Convergence is here, I believe, is to leave things better than what we found them. Yeah, that's important to me. So you think about what your why is, and why would you do that scary thing and confront those dark places, or engage in that confrontation, you know, or that conflict. It's because your why needs to be big enough. So again, that idea of isolating and using violence to solve our problems, of building thicker, wider, taller walls, you know, it's not working. It's not working. And maybe it did for a time. Maybe some of the ways, some of the things, the behaviors that have gotten us here worked for a time. It's kind of like when a person is traumatized and they have to behave accordingly to get through the trauma, right? To just survive. And now you're in a situation where the trauma no longer exists, but you're still using the same old coping mechanisms. And it perpetuates, you know, the problems seem to come over and over again. What we need is to shift a new way of behaving, new ways of looking at things. So old ways don't open new doors. And this is a quote from Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of the philosophy of the science of mind, which is, you know, where I'm a minister with Centers for Spiritual Living. We teach what's called the science of mind. And so this is a quote from Ernest Holmes. And he says, "We are the forerunners breaking down barriers of race consciousness, the accumulated effects of misperceptions and the fears of the universe in which we live. But as we free ourselves, we are helping to free the whole human race from the bondage of fear, ignorance, superstition, and thoughts based on what the past has brought forth. The past is dead. The past is gone, but we are alive, right? If we continue to do the same things that we have done, we keep pulling this kind of dead thing behind us, you know, and it's not serving anybody. So we need to find some new ways of being and doing, and they already exist. There we go. That's a little bit. My website, I haven't paid much attention to it, but I'm hoping to in the fall. I'm going to take a little sabbatical here very soon, and take some time off and finish up a book that I have started. That's about some of the stuff here. So let me look here at the questions, see if I missed anything, comments, whatever. Did I go too fast, Noel?
Absolutely not. I loved your pace, because I can, you know, I do have to do a little bit of multitasking while I'm doing this. So it was great. But I think it was a wonderful presentation. And I am going to invite everyone to go ahead, and if you turn on your video, I will add you to the group here. I'll pin you. And did you want to go to questions now, Cindy, or did you have more that you wanted to share with us? I don't mean to rush anything.
Oh, no, I'd be glad to take some questions and, see what else comes up. I know I shared a whole lot, and I probably should have broken it up so there could be questions in between, but I'm glad to speak on any of it.
Yeah, let me see, Margot, and there we go.
Is your Cindy, is your website that you just mentioned at the end, is that active now? I want to make sure we include it if it's
Yes.
Cindy C. Grimes.
Yes. Yep.
CindyCGrimes.com.
Yes.
Okay, Sheila, you had a comment there. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, when you were talking about the benefits of compassion, I had never heard it talked about as a tool for resilience. And it just was like, that's a big takeaway for me. So, where did you get that? Was that from the NVC work as well?
It was probably from Brene Brown.
Oh, that one was Brene. Okay.
I'm guessing that probably came from Brene. Yeah, I'm not positive. I'll have to look back on that. As you think it, why do you think that would be? I'm thinking about it myself now, and I have an answer. I'm just seeing if it triggered anything for you.
Well, I mean, in a way, it's survival, right? We're social creatures because we've had to depend on each other.
Yeah.
And getting along with each other, I guess, would make that work better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
we're
I
always
think
taught, about, real self-reliance and competition and all that sort of thing makes us stronger. But really, it's getting along.
Yeah. Isn't that something? I feel like that's such a big lie that we've been told, that it's about that whole survival of the fittest and the competition and all of that. And really, it's gotten us in a big mess.
Yep.
A big mess.
Margot,
And
go
I think
ahead.
people took that work and twisted it, is what.
Yes.
And that's in my opinion, that's part of at least our nation, maybe others too, but part of our national karma consciousness is that we're self-reliant. I mean, at a national level, that becomes nationalism. Self-reliance. Right. So I can do it all myself. Well, we, the United States, can do it all ourselves. And the reinforcement of that at a social level, a collective social level, embeds in the individual, reliance on oneself, and vice versa. They reinforce each other.
Right.
Bob, Marco would like to jump into the conversation.
Sure.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I just think I always go back to nature. Everything down to the cellular level in nature is entangled and dependent upon each other. And why we as humans have wrongfully thought that we don't need any of that connection or entanglement. We drank the Kool-Aid, the bad Kool-Aid for a while, but we need to wake up and see all those connections and entanglements and respect them and honor them and work through them, work through differences and see the value in differences too.
Sure. The humans, I believe, take the longest of any creature to mature in the animal kingdom. If you think about it, we come into the world totally helpless, right? Other animals give birth and within a few days, their babies are walking. Not human beings, right? Some of them are still at home at 30 years old, right? Like they don't and you think at what time, when do we stop needing other human beings? So other animals, you think fight, flight, freeze, right? Fight, flight, freeze. what is it that humans are supposed to do that okay, so the danger happens, right? There's the thing that comes at you, and then we go into this mode of fight, flight, freeze, which is to put you in survival, right? That's why animals do it, right? The tiger roars, the bird flies away, the mouse burrows in the hole, the deer falls over and plays dead, it freezes. Now think about human beings in the face. Oh, and what those things do is then it dissipates the fear, right? The mouse is afraid it's going to get eaten. It burrows into the hole, and then it can go, I'm okay. I'm in a safe place, right? The bird flies to a higher branch. It's okay. Think about human beings now. What do we do?
Get aggressive.
You
In
know,
many
most people
cases.
say like freeze, right? You're going to run or you're going to fight. But then when you think about human beings and how long we stay helpless, what does baby do when it's in danger? It can't do anything but cry.
Yeah, just cry to try to
It just,
bring
yeah, for
attention.
what, right?
Mhm.
Exactly, to get attention, to get the adults around it to do something because they're so helpless. And for years, babies are like, they can't fight, they can't run, and they can't play the freeze game. Isn't that something? Right? You think that we would know as human beings, but then, you know, we get thwarted, right? The child is afraid, the thunderstorm happens and they hop into mom and dad's bed and they say, get your butt back to bed, you know, be a big girl, be a big boy. Right? And so we start to believe or to think that we don't need other people.
Or if you do need
Interesting,
other
huh?
people, that's a sign of weakness. And
Yes, yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you're to be judged, ostracized. It's a shame. It's a shame upon yourself that you need other people. And
Right.
you know, starts a
It's
very
interesting
vicious
to
circle.
witness. Yeah, it's interesting to witness this. In the last year, we've had some 20-somethings and 30-somethings that have come into our life in a big way that are still in that mode of that you're mentioning about their dependency on parents. And you know, not just folks who have gone off to college and then because of a lot of other external factors end up living back in their parents' house again, but I mean, folks should be on their own or to have their own children, et cetera. And they don't know how to, they still aren't in a place where they can deal with this. If a bird or like you say, any other animal we can think of that would be of that equal age for their species, they'd be dealing with the world. They'd be taking care of themselves.
Yeah. Well, you know, another interesting thing I read, I think it's David Brooks. I don't know if you know the writer.
Oh, yeah,
I think it's
yes.
New York Times he's written.
Yeah.
He's more conservative.
Yes.
But he's written a book and I can't think of the name of it.
Oh.
But his assertion is that this idea of, you know, the 2.5 children and the nuclear family and all of that, that's another one of those. It was a creation. And we've started in that maybe the 40s or the 50s of like, this is what it means to be, you know, an adult, that whole isolationist thing. But the fact is we lived in tribes, you know, for forever. How long did human beings live in tribes where there were extended family and community that helped take care of children and, you know, living in community.
Is it How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen by David Brooks.
Could be.
That
I think it's his newest one. If that's the
I
newest
think
one,
it's
that's
the
probably
That's his
it.
newest one. We actually saw him. He came to the once a year, the local university has not Kindness Week. What do they call it, Bob?
I can't remember. Yeah, he was this keynote speaker.
And they bring people in with very different points of view. And he was one. We went and listened to him. It was, you know, I have a lot of respect for his message in that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I just think it's fascinating to consider that when you think of all these single parents who and moms and dad, they're beating themselves up because they can't do everything. They can't be all. We were never meant to be,
Right.
right? It's more of that just nonsense stuff that we swallowed, that we were told, that we believe, and now we hold ourselves to these unattainable ideals. And who made them ideal in the first place? Who said this is the way it should be? You know, so
Sheila just
these
added in, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
go ahead. Mm-mm,
Sheila
go
just
ahead.
added in the chat, the nuclear family could only come about with transportation. Now we are learning the loss of extended family made us stressed out parents.
Yes.
It's very interesting. We went to Ireland one time, and I think it was like, I don't know, about 2000 or something like that. And the Irish had two questions for us. They said, you know, you Americans, you live to work, and we work to live. And they also said, you know, and why do you move away from your family? You know, it was really just two questions that I never kind of considered before. I went, ouch, you got me. You know, there's a good
Right.
Especially since you moved away from your family. Right.
Yeah. And,
And me.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, we live in a much bigger country and, you know, with jobs and blah, 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 but it's also just part of our culture.
Right.
But, Cindy, I'd like to know a little bit more about the circle conversations that you were talking about. How does
Yes.
that operate? Is that separate from the other methodology we're using? Well, just explain me circle conversations.
Sure. So I was introduced to the idea of peace building and restorative practices and restorative justice. And all of those practices revolve around bringing people together in circle. And they're based on indigenous practice. So I actually started a nonprofit that is called Circle Up. And also this is the same work we do with River Phoenix Center for Peace Building. That's just in a different area. Circle Up is more like where I live in Ocala. So we've provided training a lot of different levels, like the university and for schools, and actually even for the city of Ocala. But I also do Circle at the center for spiritual living. We take one Sunday a month and we have circle conversations. So bringing people together in circle can be used for lots of different purposes, right? It can be for celebration. It can be for learning and for conversation. It can be for resolving differences and resolving conflicts. Like there's all different levels of that. So I teach the spectrum of that. And what we do at the center on Sundays is I have a different theme every month. There's something different that we talk about. For example, this month is forgiveness and grace. Forgiveness and grace. So I did a talk last week on it, and then I will take the high points of that conversation and share those this coming Sunday. And then we will break out into small groups, and the groups will answer 3 or 4 questions related to the topic. And so in circle, it's like, you know, passing the talking piece, everybody gets a chance to speak. So it's not really a discussion, but it is a way to, to see what other people think, you know, their perspectives, and it kind of makes everybody's perspective larger.
So it's not like crosstalk, like if I said something, somebody else wouldn't say, well, Noel's, you know, in my experience, it's just like, if you have the, you know, whatever your topic is, it's their experience with that they get to share. And
Yes.
people don't comment on that specifically. That's very interesting. I want to introduce you to Victoria and Ron Friedman, who are also Barbara Marx Hubbard, you know, best friend. And they have a thing called the Vistar method. And it sounds very interesting. Like when we're in circle and a topic will be brought up and no one could, you know, talk on whatever somebody else talked. There was a 2-minute limit. And there was one
Mhm.
other rule that I forget and probably broke. But it led to a real deep dive and gave
Mhm.
people opportunity to dig deeper and authentically and feel they were in a very safe place where they could share. And, and that extinguishes, I believe, a lot of the secret, um, shame, guilt. And, as you said earlier in your talk, yeah, that's just part of being human,
Yeah.
just embracing your humanness. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what people get in those circle conversations. It's really beautiful. Now, it's funny because that's one Sunday. Every Sunday is a different kind of thing that we do. And there are people who will not come to a circle Sunday. There is no way I'm going to sit and share myself with these people. And there are some people that will not miss a circle Sunday. Like they love it, but it seems to have that kind of effect. They love it, and most people really do love it. It's been really wonderful for getting to know each other, community building. Yeah, it's really good. And those, their school systems are using this, right? Circles in a classroom, having the kids get together in the morning and have a check-in every day or before they leave school at the end of the day to have just a check-in. Has nothing to do with academics. Let's just get a read on the kids. So you find out if, somebody's cat died last night, well, they're probably not going to be caring too much about the math problems, right? So it's just it's in some ways it's just common sense, like getting to know people. But in other ways, it seems like we're so far away from that, with kids on their video games and teachers come in and they just want to do business. Like we're not here to build relationships. We're here to teach.
Yeah, it's challenging. It's such a new time. I mean, that community, others in a different time, those kids would know that their friend's cat died the night before. If they're from the same neighborhood, or if there are other places where they might be in community besides just at school. I can also see it as a challenge in the diversity of home lives and things like that kids may be living and sitting in the same classroom. And
Yeah.
and there's so much more going on in the world. And as you mentioned about the loneliness factor of today, where we think, no, we can communicate with the entire world and the entire world can communicate with us, unlike our generation of those years. But there's loneliness in that also,
Yeah.
the opportunity for loneliness.
It's challenging, and in teaching teachers how to do these circle processes, they're not always comfortable with it either. It's like, oh my gosh, what if this kid says something that, I
I'm
don't want to really
sure.
know about, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's
And
very interesting. Mhm.
I think in a lot of places, uh, hmm, what do I say? Government politicians, other advocacies have decided what teachers can and cannot do. Uh, you're in Florida, so you know that quite well. And how do they even address questions that come up from kids? We've had teachers right here in our own county that was dismissed after 24 years because the way he answered a question for a student. And
Mhm.
it's wow, what a time we're living in. It's just amazing.
Yeah, so this really is like in so many ways the antidote to all of that, but people have to, be willing to do it. And it can be a hard sell in the schools because teachers are already doing so much to say, oh, you're going to add something else to my plate. But really, this is like the plate itself. Because when the relationships are working, when there's that social emotional intelligence, the learning happens a whole lot faster.
Well,
And
that's
they can
that's a
work through
great
their
point.
challenges better, right?
Right. That's a great point. Because
Yeah.
you're going to feel safer, and you're not going to feel traumatized. So it opens up that avenue for learning where you can really concentrate and pay attention. you know, and you don't have to worry about these other things and know that you'll be accepted. You know, it
Yes.
takes down a lot of barriers to learning, I would imagine. And
Yeah, it's an investment of time. It's an investment of time, but ultimately it is an investment in their better education. And, you know, I mean, yeah, there's less disciplinary issues with kids. Imagine you have a relationship with them.
Mhm. Well, I
Yeah.
just want to get in here. Margot says, you know, kids today, their connection is online and text. And she believes that teachers are heroines and heroes. And
Yes.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, and Sheila wants to said, I've been hearing the term SEL, social emotional learning, but didn't understand what it entails. Is SEL mostly based on NVC and power versus force? So that'd be nonviolent communication and power versus force.
Nonviolent communication is an excellent place to get information on social emotional learning. Power versus force is something that I pulled in for spiritual community. That's not something I would teach probably in a school. There are a couple of books out. Daniel Goleman is a wonderful, amazing author, and one of his books is called Emotional Intelligence. The other one is Social Intelligence. And it really, again, just really common sense kind of stuff. Once you see it, it's like, oh my gosh, of course, of course. Like even the idea that all of our emotions have a value. You know, instead of trying to stuff them, right? Like, oh, I can't feel that anger. I grew up in a home where, you know, one parent did all the anger, the other one did all the sadness. There is balance in the relationship, but not in the individuals. Right. And so then I come into relationship with my husband and I did what I saw modeled, and that didn't work. But it was a learning process. Imagine if we could all just know, understand that your anger has got a message for you. Your sadness has got something, you know, of value for you to understand what's going on here. And then look at that and see what it's showing you so that you can then, you know, release it, right? Move on.
There was a Disney movie a long time ago called Inside Out. Do you remember that one? And it was all the
Yes.
different characters represented all these different feelings. Well, I see they're now
Yes.
coming out with Inside Out too. Well, I'm
Yes.
getting that. I bought the first movie. I rarely buy a movie, but I bought the first one. I'm going to buy the second one. And hopefully, you know, maybe they'll have a few more emotions for me, but I just thought it was, you know, really got it for the grandkids because, you know, it's who, you know, I never sat down and talked to my great, we have three, talked to, no, what are your feelings? What are your feelings about this? Or what about that? Or, you know, what's behind that anger, you know, or,
Yeah.
you know, it's, I don't, they probably just look at me like I was, well, they already think I'm a wacko. So what the heck, you know?
No, more and more people are understanding it now. You know,
I think
more and
that's,
more.
I really think that's true. I really do think that's true. And I think, you know, the other thing I think is trauma is getting much more, people are much more realizing the role of trauma in all the social pathologies that's behind a lot of the
Absolutely.
social pathologies that we have. Because I just think of, you know, that first slide that you showed us with the, you know, when you were inside the prison and doing the Toastmasters with them.
Yeah.
You know, and just, I remember because we were, you know, with you one time and you hear these terrible things that they did and, you know, and you just have to wonder like, what was behind that? You know,
Exactly.
because you and I can have a beautiful connection right here, right now. And, you know, what was behind that? And, you know, it's also an addiction, you know, it's behind a lot of addictive behaviors, you know, it's a trauma.
Sure.
It's, you know, I think that's their way of spiritual bypassing, you know.
Well, it's a way of emotional bypass to, or dealing with
For
emotion.
sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Cindy,
I would have,
Go ahead if you had something else.
I was going to just share something about adverse childhood experiences. Are you familiar with that term?
No.
Not really.
So you were talking about trauma. So I wish I'd thought about putting this in there, but it's its own topic. But it came out of the work out of Centers for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente Insurance Company in California about 25 years ago. And it was a physician working in an obesity clinic. So every one of his patients was at least 100 pounds overweight. And he's doing the psychosocial evaluations and seeing that there were patterns of trauma, childhood trauma among these people. And so he came up with a scale. It was 10 questions that if you went through this as a child, you get a point. And the most you would get is a 10. And then that scale was correlated with every kind of dysfunction you could think of. But the 10 things is if you were physically abused as a child. Now you could have got one or a few good whippings you remember, or you could have been whipped every night. It's 1 point. If you were sexually abused, it's a point. If you were neglected, like if the dirty kid or there wasn't enough food in the house, that's a point. If your parents divorced, if there was substance abuse is a point, incarcerated parent is a point, mental health, somebody with a mental health issue or illness is a point. So you can imagine a 10 is a world of hurt, right?
Yeah.
And that was just the first study. Now they're saying there are environmental factors that can impact, right? Growing up in poverty, or growing up in a violent neighborhood where you don't know what you're going to face when you turn the corner, right? Or growing up without enough food, substandard housing. And then we've got environmental impact. So pandemic certainly was a thing. If a child's a refugee, like all of these things cause trauma. And then you superimpose that with the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to be obese, to have every kind of mental illness there is, to have difficulty holding a job, to end up in prison, to end up using drugs. And then there's the physical ailments. You're more likely to have a stroke, more likely to have cancer, heart attack, COPD, like everything. Everything. Now, we don't want to say it's causal, right? Nobody will say it's causal, but they're correlated. They go together.
Right.
We also know
mean causation.
Exactly. But if you know, or you have a child or that there is those kinds of stressors, then you can wrap services around them, because we know, like there's probably, I don't know, how many are we tonight? Statistically speaking, 2/3 have at least one ACE.
Oh yeah.
At least one. And then they happen in like bunches, right? So if you have an alcoholic parent, the likelihood is that there would be some other points along with that, right? So they kind of cluster. But we also know that there are protective factors. There are things that help kids get through. So they may have tremendous trauma, but if we have these protective factors around the child and their family, then they fare better. And those things, I would say,
What will be protective factors?
The biggest protective factor, the most important protective factor is connection. Is having somebody in your world, a relationship with somebody who sees you, somebody who cares about you, somebody who can model something better, somebody who can see possibility for you.
Isn't that interesting?
And that's the linchpin. That's the primary thing that can change everything else. Is having that connection. Again, we're communal beings. We don't realize it. We've been told otherwise. Right. But that's the hold on.
See that you would think that we've been taught that there are a lot of movies that are that one connective person that cares about you, or of different age, gender, environment that they've had, where they've had these negative point situations for their lives, and one connection brings them out of it. The basketball coach or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And it can happen at any time, you know, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a childhood, although those are tremendous and very, very important connections, but they can happen in adulthood too,
Mm. Yeah.
Right, right.
you know.
Well, Cindy, would you
there's
talk for
another-
a couple minutes? I wanted to ask her, Noel, about some of the experiences you've had in the community. My recollection is that you've worked in some of the restorative justice or other circles of peacemaking and community connection with law enforcement folks in Ocala
Yes.
and others. And if you could share a little bit about what you've seen as positive outcomes for those types of things.
Okay, so I shared that circles can be used for community building and teaching and that sort of thing. And they can be used when there has been conflict. So in lots of places around the world and in some places in the US, they're doing circles that are called restorative justice circles. Now that is where there has been a crime or some type of harm that's committed against somebody. And now I'll preface this by saying there has to be a willingness among all the participants to make things better.
Right.
Okay. This doesn't work for everybody. It's not for every situation. There has to be an admission that there was harm caused and a willingness to make things better. And you bring together the person who was harmed, the person who did the harm, and support people. And it's this is a facilitated, sometimes conversation. And you have 4 questions. Number 1, what happened? What happened? So it's like putting a 360 camera in the middle of an event and you get to see all the different angles of it. You know, and sometimes people say, you know, they know from their perspective, but they don't know what it looked like from the other perspective. So everybody learns a little something. What happened? The next thing, what was the impact? What did that cause? And everyone gets to speak about that. The third question is, how do we make things right? What is the need? Okay, what needs are here and how can we get those needs met? You know, as much as possible. It doesn't mean you're going to get everybody's needs met, but including the person who caused the harm. And we don't even like to use words like victim and offender. Or victim and perpetrator, because so often the person who causes the harm has been victimized. Again, there's the difference, like shame, I'm a bad person versus I did something wrong. You know, I was victimized versus I'm a victim. Those are different things, right? So what do we need to make things right? And then the last question is, how do we keep it from happening again? Now, these circles can be done in a very informal kind of thing, like in a classroom. Kids can learn this process, right? And they can do it. Or, you know, it can be done in prison settings with people who've committed crimes. And just because somebody has served time doesn't mean that there has really been any accountability. It doesn't mean that there's healing necessarily for anyone involved. Sometimes the circle is necessary to bring about the healing. And those circles are extreme. They're so powerful. You know, when it works, it's amazing. Even in cases of sexual assault, or there's been a murder. I mean, you can go online, go Google. And there was a show called The Redemption Project with Van Jones on CNN back in 2018. If you can catch any of those episodes, each one was a different restorative justice circle.
Wow.
And you see there how compassion builds resilience and hope, and it's so healing, so much better than just putting people, you know, storehousing them away from everyone. It's really, you know, it's diving into the messiness of the human experience. But, you know, people come out changed, you know, and I've been in these circles. Let me see if I have time to tell you this one. We had a group of 3 kids. They were passing by elementary school where they went to school, and in the summertime, and the door was open. They let themselves in. They were now 14, they're teenagers, right? So this was their elementary school. Let themselves in, got into the kitchen, opened the freezer, They went into one classroom where they knew where stuff was and like messed with the safe and whatnot. Anyway, the camera caught them. They were seeing like who they were. And when the teachers got back the next day, they looked and saw, oh my God, I know that kid. He was in my class. And so they didn't want, and they caused, when they opened the freezer, over $1,000 worth of damage. So they were looking at felony charges. So the teachers did not want them going through the system. They said, we'll have a restorative conversation. We bring the kids in, the parents, the teacher, principal, everybody. And the kids started out with their heads down like this, like can't look at anybody, And when we get to impact, and the teachers were sharing about their pain at seeing, like, you came into my classroom, I know your grandmother. You've played with my kids. I mean, it was like, wow. And then the principal to say, when I was a kid, I made mistakes too. And look at, here we are sitting here because we care about you. All of these people are taking time out of their day to be here because we want you to do better. And then they start asking, well, how can we make this up? The kids wanted to do like 100 hours of community service. We had to say, no, you can't do that much. And the teachers were offering, like, he can come and volunteer in my classroom. He was always great in math. Maybe he can help my students. And, their heads went from like this to like, now they're making eye contact with people and they're smiling. And, I feel like in my heart, those kids will never do anything like that again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right?
What a
How
lesson.
the courage it takes to say, yes, I hurt you and I'm sorry and I want to do what I can to make things right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sheila
Yeah.
says that's real justice.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
We
It's
went
heal-
into a maximum security prison in Colorado with a TEDx group, and they were doing drama and music and other things, and they also were doing things in circle. And one person, he wanted to do a restorative circle, he says, but I'm not allowed to contact the family.
Right.
So, through it got very convoluted, but he said, I can also do this in my heart, but I would really like to do it. And this guy's never going to see the outside of that prison.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really impacted me. I just think that it's the best technology there is, for, there's such a move to incarcerate so many for so little, and particularly people of color. And that, as we did our visit down in Montgomery, Alabama, this day before yesterday, and went to the Legacy Museum of Peace and Justice that Brian Stevenson has put together, just amazing complex of museums teaching about, everything from slavery to, it says from slavery to emancipation, basically back to massive incarceration.
Yep.
That we're just, and but it would just be so wonderful if we actually did what we preach and use these technologies to free people, and to understand more about their trauma, and just feel it's a very powerful technology.
Sure is.
But as you said, it takes cooperation of quite a few people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hurt people, and heals people, heal people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. I do want to back up here just a little bit in the chat, because let's see, Gail had to drop off, but she said something very beautiful. If anybody wants to get their last words in here, this is
Gail's
fun.
a Catholic school teacher, and I know she's going to watch the rest of this recording. She just had to.
Yeah.
She had to go because she got to go to class early. But she's really going to appreciate the remainder that she missed.
Yeah, she said, thank you, Cindy. Such a rich tapestry of ideas, which I'll listen to again tomorrow. Must say good night for now. Blessings to all. So
Wonderful.
thank you
I'm
so
gonna
much.
I'm gonna put another link in here in the chat, cosmic eye, you know how we're talking about how we're all connected?
Yes.
Have you seen that?
No, I
It's
haven't.
a video, so it's 3 minutes. It starts with a camera on this woman's eye and it zooms out and it zooms back in. It's phenomenal. It's in, let
Oh,
me put it
yes,
in
I
the
would
chat
love
right
to
here.
see it. Very cool. Very,
Isn't that fun?
yeah, a lot of fun. Thank you. Marco says,
Thank you.
"Universe and I combine in peace as one. Good night, all." Thank
Yes,
you all
good
for
night, everyone.
spend such a beautiful time
Bye,
together.
everybody.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so
Love-
much. Bye.
Thanks,
Good
Cindy.
night.
Love to everyone. May peace prevail on earth.
Yes.